Look, if you're facing an insurmountable obstacle in your life right now, something that just looks absolutely impossible to get past, we are going to learn how to cross that river together today. Do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button right now and let's dive right in.
So, I want to ask you, what is your Jordan River? Because let's be real, we all have one, right? Maybe it's a sudden, just terrifying health crisis. Maybe it's financial ruin, or stepping into an unfamiliar assignment, or a really difficult calling that's literally keeping you up at night. Today, we're drawing from an ancient account, the Israelites standing at the edge of the literal Jordan River. Why? Because it actually serves as a stunningly accurate, universal blueprint for overcoming those modern walls in your own life, the ones that human strength just simply cannot move.
Picture the scene with me from the historical account in Joshua chapter 3. The Israelites' 40-year wandering in the wilderness, surviving on manna, following those pillars of cloud and fire, it was finally over. Moses, literally the only leader most of them had ever known, was gone. And right in front of them, the Jordan River. But wait, this wasn't some calm, peaceful little stream. It was harvest time, which means the river was violently swollen. It was overflowing its banks, completely uncrossable. This raging flood was the one terrifying barrier standing between them and a promise made to their ancestors centuries before.
Okay, let's move into our first section, preparation before the breakthrough. As we'll see, private character precedes public miracles.
The text tells us exactly how Joshua handled this terrifying, frankly impossible situation. And spoiler alert, it wasn't by panicking. First off, he rose early in the morning. No hesitation, no sitting around waiting for better weather conditions. Second, he positioned the camp right at the edge of the river. And third, he told the people to sanctify themselves. Think about it. Whether you're a young surgeon prepping for a highly difficult procedure, a pastor planting a new church, or a company director getting ready to enter a totally new market, the leadership lesson here is exactly the same. Readiness and preparation absolutely always precede the breakthrough.
Let's zoom in on that third step for a second. Sanctifying, or basically cleaning up one's life and heart to be ready. We actually see this mirrored in some pretty powerful modern figures. Take Eddie Villanueva over in the Philippines. He went from being a committed atheist and a political activist to having this profound personal encounter with Christ that just changed his entire trajectory. He went on to found the Jesus is Lord Church and even entered public life. But he always insisted on this exact point. A nation literally cannot be cleaned up by leaders whose own hearts haven't been made clean first before God. The private character has got to be right before the public platform can ever be built.
Now, what's really interesting is our second section. Following godly leadership safely. We can call this the law of spacing.
So after 3 days of waiting by the river, the officers gave the people this highly specific, almost peculiar instruction. They commanded everyone to follow the Ark of the Covenant, but, and here's the catch, to keep a space of about 2,000 cubits between themselves and the Ark. Just to put that into perspective, that's roughly a full kilometer. Now, this massive distance wasn't about God wanting to isolate himself from his people, not at all. It was actually entirely practical for the journey they had ahead.
Because these people had never traveled this road before, right? They needed to see clearly where the ark was leading them. If they crowded the vision, the path itself would just become completely obscured. By leaving some space, they could observe, they could learn, and they could safely trust the direction. It's fascinating because John Wesley applied this exact same spacing principle back in England. As he was traveling thousands of miles on horseback to preach, he actually trained a whole generation of lay preachers by letting them observe him closely first. Then, he would send them ahead into towns and villages he'd never even visited. He gave them a pattern to follow, but without micromanaging every single step they took.
Which brings us right to the climax of the narrative. Section 3, stepping into the flood, where action precedes the miracle.
So the crucial point is that God gives Joshua a totally shocking command here. The priests carrying the ark aren't told to just stand safely on the dry bank and wait for the river to miraculously part. No way. They are commanded to walk to the very edge and stand directly in the rushing, flooded river while it is at its absolute highest level. See, faith, in this passage anyway, isn't waiting on the bank for a safe path to magically appear out of thin air. Faith is stepping in while the water is still violently rushing. True faith requires taking action before you actually see the result.
The miracle unfolds in this really strict sequence of cause and effect. Look at moment 1. The soles of the priest's feet actually touch the fiercely rushing water. Moment 2. Only after they step in, the upstream waters suddenly stop, and they pile up in a heap far away at a town called Adam. And then moment 3. The riverbed dries up, and the entire nation passes over opposite Jericho. Do you see that sequence? It's incredible. The dry ground only appeared after they bravely stepped into the flood.
And this brilliantly illustrates a universal truth we see repeated throughout history, over and over, by individuals who trusted God with the impossible. Consider George Mueller in 19th century England. He trusted God to provide for literally thousands of orphans over decades without ever directly asking anyone for money. I mean, sometimes he was receiving meals within the hour that they were needed. Or Dan Beach Bradley, who sailed all the way to Siam to introduce completely unknown medical treatments, like surgery and smallpox vaccines, to people who had absolutely no access to them. Or Dr. Kent Brantley, treating Ebola patients in West Africa at a massive personal risk, simply because he saw his medical skill as a divine calling to serve the sick regardless of the danger.
And these rapid-fire examples just continue across pretty much every sector globally. For instance, in real estate, Indonesian developer Ciputra used his immense wealth to fund schools, a university, and even works of public art, like that massive Christ statue overlooking Manado. He was sharing his success rather than hoarding it. In industry, you've got Malaysian conglomerate leader Francis Yeo, who acts openly as a steward of his wealth. He treats it as belonging to God, not to himself. And in ministry, Watchman Nee stood firm even when the ground beneath him never grew easier. Every single one of these individuals stepped forward in obedience, right into their own rushing rivers, long before they saw the full outcome.
This builds directly into our final section, a shared testimony, the 12 stones and inclusive leadership. Now, after this massive, miraculous victory, Joshua doesn't just take a solo victory lap. Instead, he was commanded to select 12 men, one from every single tribe, to actually participate in the crossing by gathering stones. You see, God's work of leading his people forward was never meant to rest on one person alone. The crossing belongs to the entire nation. It's just like how healthy churches raise up elders and deacons, or how nations function through parliaments rather than just one single voice. Truly great leaders share the burden and the victory with their community. They build strong, inclusive teams instead of just depending on a single founder doing everything. Because ultimately, this crossing wasn't just about geography, was it? It wasn't merely about getting from one side of a muddy river to the other. It was a permanent memory etched into the very soul of a whole nation, proving that the living God is faithful, present, and powerful enough to do exactly what human strength cannot do. It was meant to show, once and for all, that he keeps every single promise he makes. We're going to leave you with this really powerful line from the closing prayer today. Trust that you go ahead of us and make a path where there seems to be none. I want you to think about your own Jordan River right now. It might look terrifyingly uncrossable today, but readiness, a clean character, and the sheer courage to just step into the rushing water, that can change absolutely everything. Look, if this explainer resonated with you today, please share it right now with someone you love who's desperately waiting for their own breakthrough. So I'll leave you with this question. What is the first step you need to take into the flood today? Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you on the other side of the river.